Hello, everyone, for OneWrestling.com. This is Bill Apter, and welcome back to another edition of Apter's Alley. But this time, it's one more time the story behind the book. And there's been an untold story forever. Forever. It was untold. There was this great pocket of wrestling in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, that you people saw back in the days in the wrestling magazines through the eyes of the great photographer wrestler Tony Lanza. Well, there are two gentlemen, and one of them is with us right now, who've written a book called Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screw Jobs. And we're talking with one of the authors of that book right now, Bertrand Hebert. Did I pronounce that right?
Hebert. Hebert.
I'm pretty good with accents. I don't speak French. I don't speak any other language except English, but I can fake it. I can say to you, and he won't know what I'm talking about. Nobody will. Je le pon que j'ai bon son ton que belle son. That's it. Did I say anything intelligent there?
No, kinda.
Okay. Is that what I said? All
And
right.
enough to say, oh, I think, yeah. What
Eh?
is-
All right. Well, Bert, I wanted to let people know also that back in the day when I was with Pro Wrestling Illustrated, you were the guy that kept us informed. You were the main correspondent for that, actually all of Canada.
oh, yeah, almost at the time, yeah. Every show, Ontario and Quebec that I went to, I was calling every Monday morning to,
Yes, yes,
to,
yes. And I'd sit there and take the results and try and
yeah.
figure out the spelling of some of those French names. So you've been following wrestling up there forever. So again, it's the untold story of how Montreal wrestling shaped the world of wrestling. Tell us what brought you to the you and Pat to the door here of doing this book.
Well, Pat had this idea for one of the magazines he was producing himself of the top 25 wrestlers in Quebec history.
Okay.
And from there, that evolved into, well, why don't we do more than just the top 25? Why don't we do stories about all the big events and the golden age of Yvon Robert and Eddie Quinn and all of that thing that we're missing in the history book from Montreal. Even locally, there's almost nothing existing on the wrestling history. So from that point on, his original partner was unable to continue the project with him, and well, I was his first choice, and I was jumping around very happy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you were the logical choice.
I have 30 years of archives that I've been keeping on the Montreal territory, and I've learned so much more by researching and getting old magazines. And we went to the National Archive in Montreal, look at newspapers on microfilm films.
Yeah.
Sorry, and so it's been a great 5 year run of like producing that book.
That's fantastic. Now I have my own copy here just to let everybody know that the book put out by ECW Press, of course. Gino Brito, who is one of the legends of Montreal wrestling, is quoted as saying, "Beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the most complete book ever written on pro wrestling in Montreal." Several of the stories I read, some of the things that were so intriguing with me, because way back when I interviewed the road manager, actually, of Andre the Giant, Frank Valois, and would talk with him, and there were disputes on who discovered um, Andre, whether it was Edouard Carpentier, whether it was the Rougeaus, and in this book, everything is set straight. What is the uh, uh, out of all the wrestlers that you talked to and interviewed here, were there one or two that you passionately had wanted to meet forever and finally got to do it through this book?
Uh, Well, I had met Rick Martel before, but working on that book with him, that we became very close, and we talk on a semi-regular basis, and it's kind of very special that I have now that relationship with the guy. I was like totally in
Sure,
admiration for in when I was a kid watching wrestling in Montreal. He was like the top of the top. He
of
was the
course.
AW world champion. That meant a lot to me, and now he's kind of my friend. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of totally out of this world experience, I would say.
Okay, what was the hardest story to dig up on this
Well,
book?
I think the Dino Bravo murder is kind of
Oh yeah,
a because it's difficult to really turn it into a positive in any shape, way, or form because it's kind of a very sad story, and so we try to just bring out all the facts because some of those facts never came out of Montreal. They were in all the French newspapers at the time, so we try to bring that back into perspective. Aldino Bravo sometimes got himself into troubles before that incident, and that it might have played a part in him getting into that situation, that he might have stepped on the wrong toe at the wrong time this
yeah,
time,
yeah,
and trying to like put it in perspective with his career, because in Montreal, Dino Bravo is easily the third biggest draw ever,
oh
period,
sure, sure,
in the story. So we wanted to kind of have a perspective with that, because you kind of say, well, he was murdered and there was some business that might not be on the up and up.
yeah,
He still means a lot as far as that's why we kind of split it between Dino Bravo and Adolfo Bresciano, which was his real name. Not to mix the two. That Adolfo Bresciano did some business after wrestling that got him in trouble, but Dino Bravo remains one of the major stars of the
sure,
territory.
sure. Now some of the wrestlers, of course, that came out of Montreal became and like Dino Bravo became international superstars. Rick Martel is another one of them.
Yeah. Well, Rick Martel career, when you look at it, because you kind of forget sometimes, he was Strike Force and
Yeah,
then he
yeah,
Auto. That's what people remember the most. But before that, Martel toured almost every territory there is in the United States. He was in New Zealand and Australia as well, and he always worked. He ended up working on top on all of those territories, getting championships
oh
and
sure.
crowd reaction everywhere.
I mean, a
So
great export from
yeah,
uh, from there. What was? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, and that's what he's saying. Usually when that kind of talent comes to a territory, they end up staying where they are because they become the top guy in their own territory. But Martel came up at a time where there was Dino Bravo coming up, Raymond Rougeau coming up, and if he wanted to make a name for himself, he needed to export himself. And that's what he did, and he ended up having one of the most intriguing and interesting international career of all the guys.
Sure, definitely. Montreal it has its own history, and of course, like a lot of the other territories, the WWE expanded due to cable television and all that, and Vince McMahon and the Hulk came in one night. I was there actually that night, and it changed the entire makeup of wrestling there. What was your feeling on that? I know you were younger, of course, at that point, but
At the time, I was, big into our territory against the world,
yeah,
because we could put up the Rougeau, Bravo, and Martel against anyone. And it was hard because, it kind of became slowly in Montreal. Everywhere else, they just kind of took over TV and then start running house show. When they first started running house shows by themselves, it didn't work as good as when they were forced into a marriage with international wrestling and did joint
yeah.
shows for about 6 months with them.
Like I
And
said, I was there during the first one.
the first one, eh? And that show was one of the biggest crowd ever in Montreal, for that matter, 21,500, which was great for the forum. And it was kind of a weird, because I was already reading in your magazines that WWF was taking over every territory, and there was nothing like a joint shows going on anywhere. So
Yeah.
that was special, and we explain all of that in the book, how that came about and why it didn't last much more than it did. But it's still interesting to see. From at one point in July we had only international wrestling. Then in August they were announcing Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov from the WWF against
Yeah,
Dean
yeah,
Bravo and King Tonga from international wrestling. So it was like, whoa, what's going on there? And
yeah.
it gave us quite a few great shows actually in
Oh,
Montreal.
absolutely, absolutely. Bert, again, this is a fantastic book, Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screwjobs. It is available, of course, on Amazon.com, and let's see. Oh my goodness. Hold, I don't believe who this is calling. Yes, sir. Yes, you can. Yeah, right. You can order it through Amazon. This is unbelievable. Bert, where else can you get the book?
Any good bookstores,
Any
uh,
good bookstores, sir?
available
Any
in
good?
the
Go ahead.
States and anywhere in Canada. And if they don't have it yet, just ask them and they'll order for you.
Anywhere in Canada, sir. You got the information. So thank you for calling. Look at that. We're on Skype, and a phone call comes in asking about where they can get the book. Never happened before on this show. First time.
That's a good sign for the book.
It is. Bert, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And we will, again, it's a great read. And this is one of those books where you don't have to like start it at the very beginning and
That,
follow it through to the end. It's not that type of book that has that type of theme. You can pick this book up and here's a page on Ronnie Garvin.
yeah, and go
And
directly
there
to.
he is wearing the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Yeah, Ronnie Garvin. I mean, so many greats that you don't even remember that came out of that area. So, Bert, thank you very much.
I,
And the book is available, and we will see you at the matches. How would you say that in French, by the way? We will see you at the matches.
well, let's say it like Edouard Carpentier. À la semaine prochaine, si Dieu le
So
veut.
we do have the other author of Mad Dogs, Midgets, and Screwjobs right here in Apter's Alley. Welcome, Pat, to Apter's Alley.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
It's good to see you. I'm good. And, we've been talking with Bert, and we're going to try and creatively splice in some of the same questions that we asked him. What, in your opinion, what was the hardest story to dig up for this book?
The hardest one was how Grand Prix wrestling in the early 70s was actually created. It was actually a fluke that we were able to get that information. But basically, it came from Yvon Robert, the father. Yvon Robert had a fallout with Johnny Rougeau,
Yes.
and and he wanted to create opposition to Johnny Rougeau's promotion. So he went to get the Vachons in Minneapolis, brought them back here, along with Edouard Carpentier, who were really happy about his position with All Star Wrestling, since he was, part-time wrestling, part-time commentating,
Yeah.
and they created Grand Prix Wrestling. But how Yvon and why Yvon Robert had to go get the Vachons, and why he wanted to create opposition to the Rougeau, and that was probably the hardest one to dig up.
Who did you uh, get to meet during this period of time, during writing the book or the aftermath, that you had always wanted to meet and you didn't get to until this book came? And tell us the story of how it happened.
Well, there are so many, Bill, because I grew up in the '80s, so
Yeah,
I grew up as a fan of international wrestling, with Gino Brito and Rick Martel and the Rougeau brothers. So all these guys that I really grew up with, and they were my first wrestling heroes. Before Hogan even came to Montreal, these guys were the guys I was watching every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock in the morning,
right.
and to some of them, I consider them my friends now. I mean, Gino Brito, Raymond
Yeah,
Rougeau, Rick Martel. I can call them once a month, once every 2 weeks, and just to have news, just to take news. So it was really special to be able to talk to these guys. Like if I was calling one of my friends, just randomly like this. So and we met so many great people
oh, I'm
throughout the
sure.
processing, that I mean, I could mention a bunch of them, but I would say that Ray Rougeau, Rick Martel, and Gino Brito were probably the closest that we that I was to, in the process of the book.
If you could put a title on that great era before WWE came in, and you could title it almost like a legacy, what would you call that part of wrestling history?
The part where WWF came in Montreal,
Before they came in.
before they came to
What
Montreal.
what would you title that period of time in Montreal?
You mean in the '80s? You mean
Yeah.
just before they arrived?
Yes, yes,
Well,
yes.
well, just
Well,
before they.
not just before, but all the way back.
Oh, but I mean,
If you
Montreal.
if you could write a line, a legacy that you could put on a big block and put it up somewhere like a monument of what Montreal wrestling was before the WWE expansion, what would you call it?
I would write that whatever happened in wrestling might have happened in Montreal first.
Okay, all right, that's great.
That's something that really you could see throughout the book.
Okay, now one thing that we didn't discuss that is in the book and also on the minds of fans because it's been a controversy forever is the Montreal screw job. I mean
Uh-huh.
that were you because of the rich history of Montreal, do historians from Montreal consider that like a black eye that people only remember that?
No, not really. Well, actually, historians in Montreal, you got both of them on your show. It's me and Bert. There's nobody else than me
Yeah,
and Bert as far as wrestling historians in Montreal. And I don't think it's a black eye to Montreal wrestling. It's just something that Montreal will be associated with for forever. And in a sense, it put Montreal still on the map because in
yeah,
1997 WWF at the time was here for now 12 years, and there's still no local promotion that can run, the big arenas here and stuff. So I
sure.
mean, it kind of revived the Montreal territory because Montreal will always be talked about with this, and this is not something that Montreal, this match could have happened anywhere else in Canada. It just, it happened in
Happened to be in
Montreal.
Montreal.
It
Okay,
happened to
all
be in
right.
Montreal, and it's still, maybe one of the two biggest important matches of the modern era.
Oh, of course, of
So,
course. And the
so
controversy will never die.
exactly. So to be associated with that, it's really not a black eye.
It is a screw job, and that's where it took place. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's why it was important to put screw jobs in the title as
absolutely,
well.
absolutely. And when you fans buy the book, there's a lot of other screw jobs that are involved. And there are lots of midgets and lots of mad dogs. And I asked Bert to do this. I'm going to ask you to do this too.
Uh-huh.
In your home language, I'd like you to say, "Thank you, Bill, and we'll see you at the matches."
Merci Bill, et nous allons se voir au combat.